Hello YouTube. I will now ramble for a little while about the power armor in Fallout 4. Now, the general basic principle of the power armor frame and the way it works and functions is very much in the spirit of the original Fallout. Of the Fallout being a rather tanky item, like a personal mobile tank, rather than sort of a worn piece of clothing, or even something like that. Now, the whole execution is very good. However, there are certain areas where it becomes a little bit. Would silly be the right word? Probably yes, with the raiders, with the number of raiders you get with their own suits of power armor. Now, my solution for that would be to not make it raider power armor, but industrial power armor, a version of power armor that was developed for commercial use, not so much as an armor designed for military use, but just something, a big powerful frame, a bit like the loader in Aliens that was used to load things on and off the vehicles. Maybe something designed for use in places like mass fusion, which had large radioactive things that needed to be moved around. Maybe you can add industrial tools, but you have a low tier power armor that there is a reasonable reason for there to be large numbers of these about, that perhaps raiders or other people could get their hands on and upgrade, but it gives you a better reason for the shall we say, the first tier of power armor to exist. The second tier, the T-45, the experimental prototype power armor, which eats fusion cores like candy. Yes, that's quite reasonable, I suppose. You have, if Bethesda were to make this accessible in areas that were relatively low level, so that you could get your hands on it. Now, that seems fine. You've got something that's pretty good, but also pretty expensive to operate. Maybe make power armor using the T-45, the experimental, the early, the basic stuff burned through fusion cores a bit quicker. So there is an impetus for people to go for the T-51. Now, the T-51 was the frontline military fighting force armor. So this stuff should be around some of the military barracks, some of the better stuff. Maybe the T-45 was put over to the National Guard or to the not frontline fighting troops, but the TB-51 was the TB-51 was used for the frontline troops. So perhaps have it more in harder to reach places. Now, this stuff was the Brotherhood of Steel's primary stuff that they used for 2 centuries. It should be a bit better in terms of power consumption than the T-45. Now, I would imagine for gameplay balancing purposes, you can maybe make it far more efficient when using power cores, or perhaps have an optional slot for a mod that can be added if you have a high science perk, or if you find this mod somewhere that makes it far more fuel efficient. That would be my idea to make this feel different than the T-45, to make it what it perhaps should be. The T-60, a good idea to have something nice and cutting edge, perhaps something to bridge the gap between the TB51 and what the Enclave had. The exact amount of this stuff about, perhaps they should have been a bit more sparing with it. I can imagine something experimental, perhaps not that fuel efficient. Now, being able to do a little quest to find a plan to build a sort of modification to this to make it far more fuel efficient, that would be a nice little quest. Now, the X01 power armor, that was what's the best way of putting it? That should only be in a few very rare places. It should not be as prolific as it currently is. Now, the only people who should have this are the Brotherhood of Steel, because they killed a hell of a lot of Enclave people and should have, even if quite heavily damaged, a lot of parts of this floating around. Or people that have traded with the Brotherhood of Steel, though I can't imagine any reason why they would actually let a suit of this stuff go. And the other people that should have this are Enclave remnants who are fleeing for their lives, who probably stash this somewhere and maybe go back to it later, or get cornered and go into hiding, maybe get wounded. So you find sort of a dead Enclave officer while trying to finish fixing up their power armor, sort of died of starvation or died of radiation poisoning or something like that. The exact deployment of this throughout the game world is confusing at best. It should be was more advanced than the TB51, than the T60. The Enclave should have got the power problems dealt with so that this stuff is incredibly efficient when it comes to power cores, so that it's a very long time before refills. Heck, change the mod slot so instead of, say, a jetpack, you have some sort of fusion core or reactor, or what it was meant to have in the original number 2. I can quite easily see people swapping out, say, the mod slot for a power generator for some of the abilities such as stealth or the med kit or the jetpack. So that's a reasonable compromise for gameplay balance. Now, let's talk about the Brotherhood of Steel. The Capital Wasteland chapter should have a large number of X01 suits. Perhaps they don't have enough resources to repair them all up, but certainly their senior members like Maxon and the Star Paladins and Dance should probably have access to a suit of this stuff. Maybe only a few of their leaders for gameplay balances. And the majority of their, shall we say, their best troops, I could imagine them fitting them out with the T60s, but I would not imagine everyone gets a suit. The people who just join, well, they had plenty of T45 suits from the Citadel. They had a few T51s that they used when they marched from Lost Hills to the Capital Wasteland. It would be interesting to see, and not game-breaking, to sort of reward the player with a Brotherhood suit of T45, like the Lion's Pride had. And then when they get a bit better off, a bit better standing, then to give them a suit of T45, T51 after the T45, and then give them one of these T60s, which are much nicer pieces of technology. You wouldn't straight off hand over a what's effectively a tier 4 armor to any old Joe Soap who just happened to do a few quests for you. he would have to, or she would have to earn it. I think that that deals with most of the issues of power armor. Though there is one thing I could say about the Brotherhood. You could make power armor training a specific reward, so that someone who is trained in the use of power armor by, say, a Brotherhood, far more efficient at using it. And if the sole survivor is an ex-military veteran, then they would probably have maybe a few tricks that they could use on this. Maybe even teach the Brotherhood of Steel a few things. That would be quite good. Cheers for listening, if anyone ever does. Cheers, bye.